Ci sono altri interventi? Se non ringraziamo. C'è Herr Wende. Ja.
Sehr herzlichen Dank. Ich kann leider immer noch kein Italienisch sprechen, aber ich habe Sie gut verstanden, weil so viel Latein und Deutsch dabei war. Vielen Dank. Und ich habe viel gelernt, stimme vielen zu. Meine Frage ist, die ich an Sie richte und angesichts dessen, dass wir hier so viele wunderbare römisch-katholische Theologen haben. Man kann die Schöpfungslehre ja betonen bei Luther, dass man das über den Unterschied von Gott und Mensch oder Geschöpf organisiert, wie Sie das auch machen. Sie haben ja aber auch zu Recht, denke ich, betont, dass das Ganze geprägt ist von der Rechtfertigungslehre, ohne all mein Verdienst und Würdigkeit. Und die immanente Trinität ist Protoevangelium. Ja? Was heißt das jetzt für uns heute? Ist das ein Angebot, was Luther da macht, um die Fragen der Rechtfertigungslehre unter einer anderen Perspektive zu betrachten und nochmal zusammenzukommen? Oder disqualifiziert das die gesamte Theologie Luthers für unser heutiges Gespräch? Weil man ja eben sieht, dass die Rechtfertigungslehre tatsächlich das organisierende Grundprinzip auch der immanenten Trinität und auch der Schöpfungslehre ist. Was heißt das systematisch für uns heute? Was machen wir damit?
Ja, das ist eine große Frage. Was machen wir heute mit dieser Lehre von der Rechtfertigung? Ja, also, dopo magari Allora, il problema è un vero problema. Che cosa ne facciamo oggi della dottrina della giustificazione per fede, una dottrina della giustificazione per fede che nel caso di Lutero ingloba anche una visione trinitaria, una teologia trinitaria? Io credo che abbia molto da insegnarci, perché Lutero, pur venendo prima dell'età moderna o essendo agli inizi dell'età moderna, è stato colui che ha previsto gli sviluppi dell'età moderna con il dominio della domina ratio, cioè la possibilità dell'uomo di riferirsi soltanto a se stesso, alla sua ragione, di diventare il fondamento di tutte le cose, no? Ecco, Lutero ha contestato in anticipo questo atteggiamento che nell'evoluzione storica della cultura poi alla fine ha portato a un fallimento. Il nichilismo è nato anche da quella presunzione, da quella hybris, diciamo in greco, da quella tracotanza in forza della quale l'uomo pensa di essere l'origine, la sorgente, la misura di tutte le cose. E oggi noi sperimentiamo nella povertà di Armut der heutigen Kultur, noi vediamo nella povertà della cultura odierna questo fatto che l'uomo non è in grado di costruire nemmeno quel tipo di civiltà che a partire dal tempo dell'umanesimo, del Rinascimento, si era illuso di creare con le sue forze. Non risulta, non viene. Allora, richiamare l'uomo alla sua giusta dimensione, alla sua posizione di creatura, è già annunciargli il Vangelo, è già dire il Vangelo all'uomo di oggi. Dio, guarda che non sei Dio, du bist kein Gott. Ich sage dem heutigen Menschen, du bist kein Gott, bemerke das, sehr gut, aber es ist eine tiefe Frage, eine tiefe Frage. Und das ist schon Evangelium, wenn ich dir sage, du bist nicht Gott. Achtung, bitte. Facciamo attenzione, procediamo con calma, mettiamo le questioni al loro posto giusto. No? Io non sono Dio, tu non sei Dio. Allora? Das ist die Frage. Allora, was machen wir alle zusammen?
Bene. Bene, allora salto omaggio al nostro relatore e siamo alla terza. Comincia a diventare una raccolta adesso. È questa di adesso? No, è la terza questa. Bene, chiamiamo a parlare Joar Haga, docente presso the Norwegian School of Theology, che ci parlerà di Ontology of Hope, una ontologia della speranza. Prego, professore.
Allora, siccome la relazione sarà in lingua inglese, abbiamo fatto una traduzione. E quindi chi desidera avere una traduzione può quindi prendere quella che viene adesso. Ti ho preso già. Sì. Inoltre, siccome parla sulle tesi di homine, abbiamo fatto anche una fotocopia delle tesi in latino e inglese. Quindi chi vuole avere una copia delle tesi anche sono in distribuzione.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my lack of the Italian language, so I have to speak another language that I hardly can, but perhaps somehow can make myself understandable. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting a barbarian, a Viking, into the cradle of civilization here in my land. It is quite astonishing to be here, and I was sitting there and thinking of Augustine sitting, watching Ambrosius reading the Bible when you spoke. So I feel that I am in the cradle of civilization, Christian civilization, so to speak. So thank you. My theme would be could be seen as an elaboration of what Professor Zak was presenting yesterday, and I hope that your translation will make it possible for you to understand what I have to say. The title I have chosen is a question, an ontology of hope, Luther's Expectatio Creaturae, in his 1536 disputation on man. First, I would just present what I'm going to say in a few words. I will present a simple argument, namely that Luther fused the notion of an event, the Christ event, into ontology or metaphysics, as Aristotle labeled his endeavor of the science that follows after physics. What did that mean for Luther? In a new and creative way, I will argue, he imported elements from the Christian narrative, the gospel, into the static business of ontology. Now, there's nothing new to such an attempt. Theologians and philosophers have tried to fuse Greek thought with Christian faith, at least since the days of Origen in Alexandria. It is what a German theologian called the Hellenization of Christian thought. During the Middle Ages, this fusion was developed and refined. Still, with Luther, I would argue, there is a radical attempt to formulate the eruptive force of the dead and resurrected Christ within the Greek scheme of things. Luther is not interested in framing the Christian believer in his or her imitation of Christ, imitatio Christi, but he wants to see them as they are being conformed with Christ, as a conformitas Christi. By being conform or united with Christ, the believer is material for its future glorious form, as Luther says in our disputation in thesis 35. And I've chosen my thoughts from this thesis. However, I have a question to the wording of Luther here. Why did he use the categories materia and forma, two of the most central concepts of the Aristotelian philosophy, to frame one of the most significant aspects of the Christian faith, namely hope of a future and eternal life? It could even be argued that the theme of this conference does not fit the author it is projected on. After all, ontology is a neologism of the 17th century, coined by Jacob Lohard in his 1606 Ogdoa Scholastica, and made famous through Rudolf Goclenius' Lexicon Philosophicum some years later. In addition to the problem of anachronism of concepts, there is a more fundamental problem with the subject matter itself, however. Isn't the metaphysical content entailed in the word ontology at odds with the with the core message of the Reformers? Did not the Wittenberg movement target the philosophically informed scholasticism with the weapons of humanism, only to subject the theological endeavor under the authority of Holy Writ, that is, Holy Scripture? In Anthony Kenny's fairly recent account of the Western philosophy, 4-volume thing, Luther is given the rather dubious honor of introducing, I quote, a general hostility not just to scholasticism but to philosophy itself. This hostility had a particular negative impact on anthropology, according to Kenny. Pessimism, Kenny wrote, pessimism about the moral capacity of the trained intellect unaided by grace went hand in hand with optimism about the intellectual ability of the untrained mind illumined by faith. The German Catholic historian of church history, Joseph Lorz, went even further and claimed that Luther, I quote, interprets human nature, das Menschliche, not only as subordinated to the divine, but as contrary to the divine. God and man are opposites, he said. For Lorz and many of the Roman Catholic interpreters of Luther in the 19th and 20th century, as for some Protestant members of the Lutheran Renaissance, Luther promoted a kind of sola fide, faith alone, which rendered any speculation on human nature as futile, apart from faith. And if Luther should move into the field of ontology, why would he not prefer Platonic concepts for his anthropology. I will now try to place the concepts of materia and forma within the framework of Greek philosophy. One of the most pressing questions of the Greeks was, what is hontos hon? What is being itself? This question, I believe, was connected to the experience of time and the search for stability and structure, for some durability in the world of decay. And I believe that the Greeks had a very strong experience of time, that things ultimately fade away. Some of their most fundamental concerns center around questions like, what remains in a world that changes? How is it possible to identify a stable and fixed grid of reality when Kronos, the goddess of time, when she eats her children? What does it mean that something is, after all? I sometimes try to explain this feature or this feeling of this Greek feeling of time by pointing to this, for my students, to my hair. It has grown gray. Sorry, it was dark. Now it's gray. So I say, this is death taking a grip around my ear, and it's coloring my hair gray. And they are in shock. As we all know, Aristotle refused Plato's doctrine of the reality as something beyond the senses, as situated in the spheres of the ideas. Aristotle, he preferred the kinetic movement of materia towards forma. But that was problematic for Christian theology, however. It implied, at least in the radical interpretation, that the world was eternal and the soul withered or vanished with the body. Therefore, one could perhaps assume that the theologian as Luther would rather choose some Augustinian Neoplatonic concepts rather than the more problematic Aristotelian hylomorphism for his discussion on man. Still, in this important disputation in De Homine, materia and forma are the concepts in which Luther is developing his theological understanding of man. This may come as a surprise. Already in the philosophical probations from the Heidelberg disputation in 1518, Luther underlined that the mortality of the soul was intrinsic to the Aristotelian system. When he referred to Aristotle and his definition of the soul in De Anima, Book 3, Luther claimed that the soul is defined as the, I quote, act of the body with the potential to live. In stating this definition, Luther agreed with Thomas Aquinas, but unlike Aquinas, he holds that it is impossible for the Aristotelian anthropology to split the soul from the body at the moment of death. It is the composite nature, the being together of body and soul, which determines the mortality of the person. Body and soul are so intimately connected that they must perish at the time of death. As materia and forma, they make up one thing, una res, and there is no sign by Aristotle that they can split. In fact, Luther claims, when Aristotle in Metaphysics, Book 12, listed the eternal bodies, he did not include the soul, which is one of his arguments for this dying of the soul at the moment of death. In his attempt to formulate an educational reform in 1520, Luther had in the Adelsschrift mentioned Aristotle's four most important books. That is, his physics, his metaphysics, psychology, and his ethics, as rather vain and futile objects of study for the students. One can neither learn anything about nature nor spiritual subjects, he claims. Concerning his best book, which for Luther was Aristotle's Psychology, namely De Anima, on the soul, it nevertheless teaches that the soul dies with the body, even though many attempts have been made in order to save his reputation, that is, to save Aristotle from this sad outcome. However, Luther's radical reading of Aristotle begs for an answer to at least one question. If it was so obvious for Luther that the ontology of the person by Aristotle entailed an indissoluble composition, why did he choose to work with concepts as central as materia and forma? This is perhaps even more puzzling if it